one. You may now begin.
Morning and welcome to the Development and Finance Committee hearing or meeting of the Housing Opportunities Commission on September 1st, 2023. I am Commissioner Jeff Markowitz. I am joined today on my left by Commissioner Rick Nelson, and joining us virtually is Commissioner Robin Solomon. I believe the first item for us to approve is the minutes from the May 26th committee meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second? I guess approval of the minutes has been properly moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Next item, I will turn over to Executive Director Chelsea Andrews to discuss issue around 8808 Brookville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, members of the public, and the HLC team. Today we have a matter before you related to one of our parcels. This particular parcel is slated for warehouse commercial use. It's not a residential property. And we received a letter of intent to negotiate the potential sale of this property. Before you, you have Marcus Irvin, our Director of Development, who could provide more details.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm here today to present a summary for disposition of a property located at 8800 Brookville Road. For context, in terms of the property overview, the Commission acquired this parcel approximately 10 acres back in December of 2018 for approximately $10 million at the time of future redevelopment, which was in alignment with the sector.
Okay. All right. Part two. Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Mark Irvin, Director of Development, HSC, here to present the approval for the Executive Director to authorize execution of a letter of intent with the Donahoe Companies in connection with the disposition of 8800 Brookville Road. For context, this was a property, 10-acre piece that was acquired back in December of 2018 by the Commission with the intent for future redevelopment in alignment with the Liddensville sector plan. We did explore a land swap within the last year, but those plans did not materialize. Since that time, the property is operated with a landscaping company, and there's also a cell tower lease existing on the property. The Donahoe Company is a reputable developer based out of Montgomery County, experienced in industrial properties and a variety of commercial types. Submitted an unsolicited interest in purchasing the property. The current offer before us represents an amended letter of intent at $14.5 million, which is in line with the market. They would intend to go through the planning process after execution of the LOI, allowing us time to negotiate a purchase and sale agreement. And within that 9-month period from contract to close, do their necessary due diligence, which they are comfortable with the property. They would propose using the property for industrial use, future in nature, as they do have parcels that abut the HSC piece. This is essentially the hole in the donut for their larger acquisition, so represents an opportunity for them that aligns with their interests, fits in with the sector plan for industrial zoning. They could go standard method, doesn't require any use, so this is a good option for them. Once again, they've offered a competitive offer at $14.5 million with a deposit of around $100,000. Staff recommends that the Commission authorize the Executive Director to execute a letter of intent with the Donahoe Companies and proceed with negotiation of a purchase and sale agreement. We believe that this is an advantageous opportunity for the Commission, one that realizes the property value in a shorter duration and aligns with our objectives. Be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, would you as I read this, I'm a little confused, but maybe you can scream me out in terms of when does their $100,000 go hard?
Yeah, so that would be within 120 days of the execution of the purchase and sale agreement.
Which is 90 days.
Correct. So 90 days, we would negotiate the purchase and sale agreement. If it's done before then, at that point, within that period, they have up to 120 days to complete their any necessary due diligence. So either party can pull out at that time, but they're committed to moving forward given the opportunity.
Well, I guess the thing that bothers me about that is that's roughly 7 months that we're committed to taking the property off the market. And there is no risk to them.
There are hurdles in place with the LOI. I can pull that information provided to the executive director. At such time when there is a portion of the deposit that they would lose, I can go back and pull that for you. But
And $100,000 seems kind of on the low side, no?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you when you said, Robin.
$100,000 seems on the low side. Maybe at the close of due diligence, it's a bigger number, no? Or what is your experience?
I would say all things are negotiable if we need to increase the deposit in any way. But
I mean, it seems to me that I understand the need for due diligence and all that, but I don't know what due diligence Donahoe has to go through. They own the parcel next door. They've been looking at this thing for forever, I'm sure. So I just don't quite understand why they're coming to us, asking us to take it off the market. And I don't know what they're going to do for 7 months. And I don't disagree with Robin's comment in terms of $100,000 versus a $14 million deal. I just am not comfortable with that.
I could chime in here. The current proposal is significantly higher than their initial offer. When they initially presented a LOI to HOC, it was much closer to $12 million. Many of the terms were negotiated in terms of getting that purchase price higher to 14.5 million, which we are very happy with, and it does allow it. There's a benefit to us as well. This is not a parcel that is really in a position from our perspective to have many other offers at this time. And it also is a parcel that is causing us to be in a position where we will eventually lose funding over time because of the increased cost of the loan that we have and the interest that we're accruing. So in working with them and negotiating, we reduced the length of time for finalizing the contract to 9 months. We also were able to negotiate a higher sales price. We can go back and create another counter in terms of the length of time for the deposit to go hard, as well as consider what that amount should be. But we do believe we are negotiating in good faith with a partner who is going to see this through. And quite frankly, we will probably have an opportunity to close the deal before the 9-month time frame. So we just want to move in an expeditious manner, definitely taking your feedback and comments and perspective.
I mean, is that 9 months a typical time frame?
And I'll defer to Zach Marks to give some additional context.
Yeah, I mean, it's short. It's typically, it's actually shorter than is typical. Normally you would have, and originally that was part of the request. You'd have an entitlement sensitive timeline around that. And that was one of the things that we really felt was important, was just to get a firm fixed, relatively short timeline to purchase for many of the reasons that Commissioner Nelson mentioned in terms of the familiarity with the property and so forth. So, so the nine months, whether you're entitled or not, kind of timeline was certainly one of the key asks that we made.
You're saying that they're going to get entitled during that period?
They may or may not, but it's the contract's not contingent on it, and they understand that if they're not, they're not. and that they're going to close within 9 months either way. So, because it's standard method, it's industrial zoned. It's not particularly fraught. It's really just the time. It's really more of just the time it takes to get through that process. It's usually closer to something like, 18 months. So, the negotiation was really over, how much carry do they want to have? Normally as a developer, you're trying to make that 0. And so that was one of the things we clawed back from them. So
You say the normal time is 18 months?
for standard method, 12 to 18 months. Yeah.
We've
It's
never
very-
had 18 months for
We've never done
waiting
standard
for
method. We don't do standard
for
method. Yeah.
an acquisition to go,
Yeah.
deposit to go hard. So
Yeah.
I mean, I appreciate the 14 million. I think that's great. But it's also, it hasn't gone out to bid. I guess the 100,000, I'm not as distressed in terms of the amount of that. I personally think the 100,000, in view of the fact that I don't know why they want to wait so long. I mean, they probably don't want to develop until later. But I think they need to put their money up at risk. And we should look for, I think, it going hard, either at PSA or shortly thereafter.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly go back and, we're on YouTube. So we can certainly go back and look at shortening the study period from 120. We can certainly go look at the percentage of the earnest money deposit. I think to Commissioner Solomon's point, it's a little on the light side. You typically see something like 1 to 3%. Usually the larger the deal, you're more towards 1%. So we're below that 1% here. I think it's like 0.6 or something. So we can certainly go back on that front as well. And I just would also add that the 90 days to get the PSA is not a requirement from them or us. They're very eager to get under contract. So it's just simply how long does it take for us to get an executable form in place, and I don't anticipate it taking us 90 days. Both parties want to move expeditiously. So as soon as we're under PSA, it's really then that study period, and which is inside of that 9-month overall closing period. And so both for the reasons that Executive Director Andrews mentioned, and where the property has been very fortunate to accrue net positive cash flow until rates went up. But now that rates are up, we're starting to eat into that cushion. And it's really not a property that has any housing capacity. So we would love to move it, free up resources, add a profit to the commission. And I would also add it without a brokerage fee. So we're saving on that.
Yeah. The briefing said there were 2 appraisals. How recently were those conducted?
Yeah, the appraisals were done approximately a year ago. However, market indications still hold that the current premium price is in line with market and is defensible. So we still have a good offer in our hand.
Rick, do you have additional concerns?
Yeah.
Are there any additional questions?
Nope.
Is there a motion that anyone wants to make regarding the staff's recommendation?
Would it be subject to the points that Rick was making and all, which we don't want to negotiate in public? I get it, but would the motion be subject to what we were just talking about?
We're just contemplating the wording for a motion. Go ahead.
Commissioners, I would just proffer that one proposal would be to allow me to negotiate based on the feedback that I've heard from the board and move forward with terms that align with the recommendations that have come from this committee. Ultimately, it would have to come before the board
No,
for final, but
no, I think that, I mean, that's acceptable to me. And I'm sure somebody's got those magical words that you just uttered, now to make the motion. So I think that essentially I would move that we authorize the executive director to further negotiate this and make a presentation to the board for the final, consistent with the discussion that we've had this morning.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Let's have it. The motion is approved.
thank you.
Our second item today, action item, has to do with Hillendale Gateway. Executive Director Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're pleased to continue our path forward with the Hillendale Gateway project. As you'll see in today's presentation, we have a number of items for your consideration as we move this project along. I will turn it over to Catherine Hollister, our Housing Acquisition Manager, who has been leading this project.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Catherine Hollister. I'm a Housing Acquisition Manager in the Real Estate Division. Staff is requesting that the Development and Finance Committee join staff's recommendation to the Commission that it approve Hillendale Gateway's final development plan and transaction structure. As part of the final development plan, staff is recommending approval to negotiate and execute a guaranteed maximum price amendment with CBG Building Company and approval of an interior designer and FF&E budget. As part of the transaction structure, staff is recommending approval to create a condominium regime, approval to create new tax credit entities, approval of a LIHTC syndicator and construction lender, and approval to accept construction financing sources. On page 15 of your packet provides background on the Hillendale Gateway development. Hillendale Gateway will be a visionary new mixed-use, mixed-income, intergenerational community located on the site of Holly Hall Apartments. It will contain 463 units in 2 residential buildings, one a 155-unit net zero energy age-restricted senior building, the other a 308-unit passive house non-age restricted multifamily building. The development will also have a drive-through coffee shop, above-ground parking garage, commercial retail restaurant space, and public and private green space. Page 16 of your packet discusses the development highlights. Hillendale Gateway is a hallmark development that incorporates a number of agency, county, and state priorities, many of which are listed here. Notably, Hillendale will set new benchmarks in terms of sustainable and resilient development. It will also create a vibrant community that will serve as a catalyst for broader economic transformation in eastern Montgomery County. Page 17 of your packet highlights many of our partners for this ambitious project. The development team has engaged experts from across the country to help us make the goals for Hillendale Gateway a reality. Page 18 of your packet provides a quick snapshot of some of the development numbers. On the slide, I want to highlight the development's affordability. Hillendale Gateway will provide a full spectrum of affordability, both site-wide and within each residential building, by providing units that range from deeply affordable to market rate. Page 19 of your packet discusses the final construction budget for Hillendale Gateway. At the January 2023 Commission meeting, staff recommended and the Commission approved a 2-phase contract with Hillendale Gateway's general contractor, CBG Building Group, for the construction of Hillendale Gateway. The first phase, known as the early start phase, would allow for a limited scope of construction to proceed prior to full construction closing. And the second phase, known as the vertical construction phase, would establish the guaranteed maximum price for the project and allow for the vertical construction to proceed. At that meeting, the Commission approved the early start phase of the GC contract in an amount not to exceed $11.5 million. The early start construction phase is currently underway and is anticipated to be completed on or under budget. The GMP amendment budget as of October 14th, 2023, known as the August GMP budget, shown on this slide, represents the total construction contract amount for the project and includes early start and vertical phases of construction. Specifically, it includes all hard costs to construct the residential buildings, parking garage, site improvements, and transportation improvements. Retail construction costs are carried under additional construction costs on page 25 of your packet. The August 2023 GMP budget represents a $650,000 savings from the GMP budget that staff presented to the commission almost a year ago in September 2022. Staff recommends that the commission authorize the executive director to negotiate and execute a GMP amendment in the amount not to exceed $189 million, which provides a 5% contingency over the 2023 August GMP budget amount of $180 million. Page 20 of your packet shows the construction schedule for Hallandale Gateway. At the top of the slide are the early start construction milestones, and at the bottom of the slide are the vertical construction milestones. Based on the current project schedule, Hallandale Gateway is anticipated to reach substantial completion in August 2026. Page 21 of your packet discusses staff recommendation regarding approval of interior designer and FF&E budget for the project. HOC's procurement office issued a request for proposal for interior design and furniture, fixture, and equipment known as FF&E acquisition services for Hallandale Gateway in June of 2023. HOC received responsive proposals from 3 firms. Proposals were scored by a scoring committee comprising of real estate and risk management staff based on the 4 scoring criteria outlined on this slide. Respondents earned scores between 60 and 81 points out of the possible 100 points. Scoring was extremely competitive in 3 out of the 4 scoring criteria. All 3 firms scored are MFD firms and demonstrated significant experience performing these services for projects of similar size and scope. The biggest factor in the difference in scoring was in the price category. The 2 highest bidders were approximately 46% and 80% higher than the lowest bidder. As such, staff recommends selecting Market 9 Design to provide interior design and FF&E services for Hallandale Gateway, and to authorize the executive director to negotiate a contract in an amount up to $253,000, which includes an HOC-held contingency in the event additional services are required. Additionally, staff recommends a hard cost FF&E budget for the Hallandale Gateway project in the total amount of $2.5 million, which is the hard cost of the FF&E that will be installed in all residential amenity spaces, indoor and outdoor, within the residential buildings. Slides 22 and 23 of your packet illustrate the proposed ownership structure for Hallandale Gateway. Given the mixed use, mixed income, multi-generational nature of the development, and to optimize financing strategies, staff recommends the creation of a condominium regime for the Hallandale Gateway development. This is a common ownership and financing strategy that HOC utilizes in many of its developments. For example, Alexander House, Fenton Silver Spring, and the Leggett. Specifically, staff is recommending the creation of 2 tax credit limited liability companies that will sublease and own condos consisting of 155 age-restricted LIHTC units within the AR building and 93 LIHTCs within the NAR building, respectively. These tax credit LLCs are described in more detail on slide 23. Creation of these tax credit condos is important because they enable the development to utilize LIHTC and investment tax credits, just known together as tax credits, for the construction and permanent financing of the affordable units within the AR and NAR building. Additionally, as part of the proposed ownership structure, staff recommends the selection of Wells Fargo Community Lending and Investment as a tax credit investor in both the AR and NAR LIHTC condos. Not only did Wells Fargo provide the highest tax credit equity pricing, it provided LOIs for both the AR and NAR LIHTC condos. Having the same investor on both LIHTC transaction is hugely beneficial to streamlining this complex transaction and reducing transactional costs. Wells Fargo has been the investor on a number of previous HOC developments, including Residence on the Lane, Fenton Silver Spring, and Metro Point. Slides 24 and 25 of your packet discuss the operating pro forma and sources and uses for the overall development. The operating pro forma represents the projected combined stabilized operations for the overall transaction. Total operating expenses are in line with CDA's LIHTC underwriting guidelines. As you'll see on this slide, utility expenses are projected to be significantly lower than a typical multifamily development due to Hallandale Gateway's passive house design and renewable energy production. The real estate division is working with mortgage finance and asset management to finalize these operating assumptions, which will be fully presented in more detail as part of the final finance plan, which is expected to be presented to the commission in October 2023. On slide 25 are the sources and uses for the development. Uses for the transaction include all hard costs, soft costs, and financing fees related to the development. Staff is proposing that sources for the transaction include senior financing from city, HOC equity, tax credit equity, county HIF, HPF, and Montgomery County Green Bank financing. Regarding the senior financing, staff received multiple LOIs from third-party construction lenders. City Community Capital provided the most beneficial terms for the overall transaction and was the only lender to provide LOIs for all components of the transaction. Similar to the reasoning for Wells Fargo and the benefits that come with having one sort of financing partner across the whole transaction, utilizing one lender really does streamline this complex transaction and reduces transactional costs. Staff is working with City to finalize the details on the optimal loan structure for this development, and will present those details as part of Hillendale Gateway's final financing plan. On the next slide, so this morning you should have received a revised packet with an additional slide. We don't have it here, but I can speak to it, and we'll make sure that it's included in the packet that goes to the commission. On that slide, as part of the revised packet, the slide attempts to break out the residential components of the project from the retail and site work components of the development. As you know, Hillendale Gateway is a large mixed-use development. It's a large site. It's approximately 5 acres. There are some unique costs pursuant to the retail components and site work components, and there's transportation improvements that are required for this project that are unique to this project. So the additional slide that was sent around this morning attempts to break those out. When you isolate residential costs, the per unit development cost is closer to $600,000 per unit. Additionally, while it's not shown on that slide that was circulated earlier this morning, staff has conducted further analysis comparing the residential per unit cost of Hillendale with other HOC developments, specifically the Leggett and the Laureate. This analysis shows that Hillendale's costs are on par with the Leggett and Laureate on a per unit basis, except for construction costs, which I'll describe in a second, construction period interest, which is due largely to the current interest rate environment and development duration, and developer fee. Regarding the developer fee, there are 2 main reasons why the developer fees are higher than the 2 other deals. First, developer fees are based on total development costs. So when construction costs and construction period interest costs are higher than normal, the developer fee will also be higher. As a percentage of total development costs, Hillendale Gateway's developer fee is 7% versus 5% at the Laureate and 4% at the Leggett. The higher developer fee here at Hillendale Gateway is due to the extra developer fee HOC is able to earn on the 2 LIHTC components of the transaction beyond the standard 5% developer fee. Finally, we took just the construction contract, the residential construction contract for the 3 deals. As you may remember, the Leggett closed in 2019. The Laureate closed in 2021. What we attempted to do is trend those construction costs, just taking purely the hard costs and trending them to today. As you may remember, in 2022, we saw an exorbitant increase in construction costs. In Hillendale, it was 30%. And that was, somewhat standard across the industry. So what we tried to do is trend those construction costs to show if the Leggett and Laureate were built today, what would those costs look like? And when you trend those costs, Hillendale Gateway is right in between the 2 deals. The Laureate is cheaper by about $50,000 or $60,000 per unit, and the Leggett is more expensive by about $50,000 or $60,000 per unit. So Hillendale Gateway is, when you level set on the construction costs, is on par with those 2 other developments. Finally, the last 2 slides of the presentation present the summary recommendations for this item. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions?
I would have appreciated seeing the permanent financing sources and uses. and how the debt was underwritten on the permanent side. And not in this forum, but it would be useful to know what Wells Fargo was suggesting for guarantees and the dollar amounts. I know the development guarantee is unlimited, but the operating guarantee is capped. There are capture guarantees done, those kind of things. Again, I don't want to have that all discussion in this forum, but that would be useful to me, the permanent, as well as some of the details on their LOI.
Commissioner Solomon, we will return with the financing plan, and that will afford you an opportunity to have much more detail around the financing. This is just a development plan presented by the development team, and then subsequently we return to the board. We're continuing, of course, to negotiate and explore all financing options, and then we will come back to the board with the financing plan that will require approval by the board and have those additional details.
But I appreciate that. Thank you very much. But you're signing an LOI, and so that contemplates certain details. I think it would be interesting for the development committee to understand what's contemplated in the LOI. I understand LOIs can change as you get towards permanent.
Yeah, I can include additional details on those terms.
And it could be a different forum than.
Yep.
I understand. I was curious, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt my fellow commissioners if you've got other questions.
No, go ahead.
On the underwriting of, and again, maybe there's a different forum to have this discussion. There's guarantees and reserves as a use of funds. What are the guarantees and reserves you're funding during construction? I'm curious.
Yeah, so this does represent just the construction period guarantees and reserves. Let me pull up and speak more precisely to that. Give me 1 second.
And again, if this is the kind of detail, we should have a discussion, a different forum. I understand.
Yeah, so that's primarily a construction period operating reserve for the construction period guarantees and reserve.
Speaking of construction, I've got some here banging around. I'm sorry. That makes more sense to me because I didn't know what funding guarantees was during construction.
Yeah.
On your reserve for replacement of $350, that seems high for new construction.
Yeah, I think that is standard for HOC projects. Yeah.
Good morning. For the record, I'm Irene Brown, Deputy Executive Director. We try to start building a healthy reserve for when our properties start to need capital investments. And so, because I don't believe in this transaction, we're funding an upfront reserve because it's a new construction. And so by starting with $350 per unit, it enables us to build a healthy reserve for the future. I think FHA requires $250, but HOC's practice is to start at $350 per unit, which we find over time is not nearly enough. But so this starts us off on at least right footing.
You know, I found from a math viewpoint that pre-funding the reserve at stabilization at X dollars per unit and lowering the annual contribution generates more proceeds. Just something to fiddle with is at stabilization putting in blank per unit, 1,000 a unit, whatever the number is, and reducing the annual, and you end up with more proceeds often.
Yeah, we do that sometimes. So
we do that sometimes, and it's in this transaction we can certainly look at that.
Yep.
So it's an alternative way of viewing the reserves.
And please tell me if I'm nitpicking too much, and there's a better place to have this discussion. I'm also learning. Appreciate your time, and I want to steal from my fellow commissioners.
Rick, you.
Yeah, a couple questions. On the chart you just handed out in terms of the comparison with Hillendale and the others, the construction interest and negative arbitrage is $37 million for this. What's the basis for the significant difference in terms of percentage of those costs for this project versus the others?
So you're looking at the chart that compares Hillendale Gateway with
Yes.
the Leggett and Loria. Okay, let me just pull that up so I have that in front of me. Okay. And you're speaking specifically to the construction period interest and negative arbitrage costs?
Yes.
Yeah, so the main driver and the difference here is twofold. One, interest rates. Interest rates are significantly higher now than back in 2019 and 2021. It's the highest that
Right.
I've seen them since I've worked here. And it's also, so it's partly due to that, and then it's partly due to the construction duration. The development period for Hillendale Gateway, it's a large multi-building development. The development duration is about 45 months. So given the longer duration and the higher interest rates, that's why those costs are higher.
Talking about the development duration being 45 months. Is this really the time to, in fact, tie down the price of the furnishings and equipment? I mean, we're talking about not purchasing that for some time, and we all know that in 4 years, today's price is going to be nothing like what it's going to be 4 years from now. So how do we rationalize including that now?
So the FF&E budget of 2.5 million, we're establishing that now because we really do need to finalize all of our development costs as best we can right now before we close. That 2.5 million does include potential escalation in the cost of FF&E. So we are anticipating not needing to buy that until about 2 or 3 years down the road. You're right. Given just where costs have been recently with FF&E, that's why we built in some additional contingency into that 2.5 million number. So in case costs do go up, we have funding available. But absolutely, we're going to try to hit that timing where if costs come down, then locking in those costs. It's the same thing with our construction contract right now, where we're seeing some trades soften. Concrete, I think, was a big one. We're seeing some trades that are still increasing, electrical. So, between now and when we close, we're going to continue working with subs to try to really tighten pencils and make sure that we're getting the best value. And if we can lock in pricing now where there's a dip, we're going to do it. There are some things we can hold off on, things like solar panels. Again, we won't need those until towards the end of construction. We'll be monitoring those prices and try to buy those out at the optimal time.
Okay. The other question I have, in terms of HOC equity, we currently have 14 million from the OHRF in the deal, correct?
Yes, it's around 14.2 million. Part of that is from the majority of that's from the OHRF, and then a portion of that is, if you remember, when we sold the Kona site. So it's both proceeds from that sale, which would have gone to the HORF if we didn't keep in the deal with the development.
And where is the value of Holly Hall land?
So the Holly Hall land, we're at right now, we're in a 99-year ground lease. So there's no land acquisition cost in the uses. Instead, there are ground lease payments. So that was part of a sale lease back with our development partner. So that value of the land isn't necessarily represented in the uses here. We're paying a ground lease on that.
Okay. And how much was the coffee shop? I mean, how much of the 14 million, let me rephrase it. The 10 million, I think you're estimating that we're going to put in terms of equity from HOC, will all come from the permanent financing, and we won't have to dip into OHRF anymore. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, this HOC equity that we're requesting here as part of the development would be the same amount, would not change, would not increase at permanent
Okay.
conversion.
Okay. I'm still troubled by the cost. I mean, this is, I guess I must be around, I've been around too long, because I remember when we complained about going to $300,000 a unit. This is absolutely absurd. I'm not being critical of you. I mean, it's just very hard to stomach this. And I don't know what the solution is, but it is, I don't know how we can continue to be able to develop these properties and get the revenue necessary to pay the financing costs. $600,000 a unit is absolutely crazy. I'm just very bothered by it.
Are there any additional questions?
Is the senior loan a taxable loan? The senior construction loan?
So that's, again, we will present that at the final finance plan. We're right now looking at whether or not we're issuing bonds now or at permanent conversion. So it will likely be a mix of taxable and tax exempt.
And so the taxable, I guess you can't do it. Can you do a draw process, or you have to pay negative arbitrage and take down the whole thing for construction interest purposes and all?
Yeah. So if we, even if we were to issue bonds, and Karen can step in here. I'm not the mortgage finance or bond expert, but having worked closely with our team, my understanding is even if we were to issue bonds now, we do not anticipate incurring negative arbitrage because the account that those bonds will be held will be earning a higher interest than what's due.
So the
Right.
negative arbitrage isn't a big deal in this.
Right, and we're in an environment where there is the opportunity for positive earnings while we're waiting to use the bond proceeds. So negative arbitrage is not a huge issue currently. So, as compared to years ago when the investment rate was significantly lower. So that's not a huge factor. However, we're still working through the financing structures with our financial advisor and trying to come up with the best all-around final financing plan that optimizes proceeds, minimizes risks, and makes the deal most feasible.
And the takeout is FHA risk carrying or something else? Or you haven't gotten that far yet?
That's what we're looking at currently. Yep.
Thank you.
If there are no additional questions,
I'm sorry, I do have another one. I'm back on my FF&E question. We're being asked to approve a hard cost budget. No, wait a minute. Authorize, wait a minute. Authorization for them to acquire FF&E in an amount not to exceed the hard cost budget. So are we locked into 2.5 million with Market 9 design now?
No, absolutely not. Nope. That is a not to exceed. What typically happens is, the contract amount with Market 9 Design, the up to not to exceed $250,000 amount, what that buys is their services to finalize interior design drawings,
Right.
to finalize selections, and to also finalize the to provide us a proposal on FF&E in terms of how many couches do we want, how many TVs, and then within that, the owner HOC establishes the budget that the interior designer would have to execute under. So that 2.5 is for HOC to work within, and we will provide, a budget to our FF&E procurer to acquire within that budget. It does not mean that they have authorization to acquire 2.5 million. I hope
Okay.
it's not, hope we can find savings there.
If there are no further questions, can I get a motion to approve the staff recommendation or to support the staff recommendation? Is there a second?
So moved.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. The ayes appear to have it. The motion is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next issue for discussion has to do with the Leggett. Director Andrews.
Yes, thank you. Commissioners, as you know, the Leggett and the South County Regional Recreational and Aquatic Center and probably will be one of the largest projects that we undertake in terms of development. It is one that is extremely complex and requires a great deal of oversight and coordination. And I will say on the record, want to give great appreciation to Marcus Irvin, who's been working diligently on this project, as well as our entire real estate team. And so what you have before you is really a reflection of us getting towards the end of this project, needing to ensure that we get to completion while we resolve change orders and all of the modifications needed to see this project to completion. I will turn it over to Marcus Irvin to provide further details in regards to this request.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Marcus Irvin, Director of Development. Once again, here to present approval to draw on the PNC Bank line of credit and real estate line of credit to replenish the contingency for the South County Regional Recreation and Aquatic Center, also known as the SCRAC, and to draw on the PNC real estate line of credit to replenish the contingency for the Leggett Apartments. So we're here to discuss these two pivotal projects. Once again, as Director Andrews had mentioned, our immediate goal is to secure approval for additional contingency funding to ensure the completion of both projects. Currently today, just in context, the Leggett is a 267 unit age restricted facility. We have reached substantial completion just this past March after some delays and challenges with construction. Staff and the property manager have been actively leasing. This project also alleviates housing shortages for seniors. The SCRAC, as a complement, with its expansive recreational and healthcare facilities, promises to be a community hub. The project closed back in October of 2019, funded through a diverse portfolio of about 125 million. Pioneering investments, as mentioned, utilizing tax-exempt bonds, low-income housing tax credits, and a variety of other financial tools. Present day today for the Leggett. As mentioned, the doors are open, currently around 54% leased, about 32% occupied. Additionally, as part of the larger Elizabeth Square Master Plan, all the seniors from the former Elizabeth House have now been relocated into the Leggett. If you recall, just a few months ago, the commission approved authorization of the selection of Berg demolition. They are in the process with a variety of pre-development activities to remove materials from the building and prepare for demolition, which we'd anticipate will be completed sometime going into spring, summer of next year. So that's ongoing activities. For the South County Regional Recreation Aquatic Facility, currently exterior work is ongoing in the main paver patio area, the plaza area where we held the ribbon cutting. Working from the outside, there's a variety of metal panels that are under construction. Moving inside the facility, active work is ongoing between the three different competition, recreation, and leisure pools. The gymnasium has been largely completed with flooring placed down, a variety of exercise and activity rooms, and our Holy Cross health space is nearly complete, and they're working towards early completion of that facility. Once again, as these aren't standalone projects, but part of a larger master plan, it's taken a lot of coordination with multiple stakeholders, including Holy Cross, Department of General Services, each with specific demands and deliverables. It's layer complexity, but the team has worked through these challenges. As mentioned during the Hillendale Gateway presentation, this project has weathered storms, including the pandemic, which have resulted in some delays on both sides of the projects. As the legate is complete, there are some additional construction costs which the team is working through, which is part of this request, and amounts up to about $2 million. On the SCRAC, there are additional change orders as the project rounds the bend towards completion, which we've estimated at roughly $3.5 million. These outstanding change orders, they are likely to raise the final project on the SCRAC, but the team will continue working through these and would return later in 2023. So at this point, as the costs aren't fully known, no representations around the final proceeds can be made at this time. So to cover these, to cover the exposure on both projects, staff is recommending a draw of up to $3 million from the PNC line of credit for the SCRAC or the South County Regional Recreation Aquatic Facility component of the project, drawing up to $2 million from the PNC real estate line of credit for the legate. Unobligated balance in both these accounts are sufficient to meet the needs. Currently where the legate is, with the final completion of that, we would anticipate doing the cost certification, which would allow for receipt of LIHTC proceeds, which the gap is needed for. These interim draws don't affect HOC's FY24 budget, as they'd be reimbursed by the project funds once again through on or around year end. In terms of staff recommendation, we strongly advocate for these as stipulated in our financial agreements. This will give us the financial runway to meet our objectives in completing this project. As mentioned, no hard dates, but the next milestones would be the opening of the Holy Cross Center and completion of the SCRAC pool and recreation portions. I'll take any questions you may have at this time.
Are there any questions?
I didn't understand the words funding the contingency. Are you pre-funding the contingency, or are you just going to take down from PNC funds that need to pay for overruns?
This will replenish the contingency on both projects. For the SCRAC, HOC is responsible for any additional change orders on their project. So this is replenishing the contingency for the SCRAC per the figures that we estimate as the exposure on there. And then for the legate portion, once again, because it is one project, there are some shared costs between the building components. So that would replenish the contingency on the legate to close out any additional cost on that side.
Yeah, it's basically a technicality because we're still finalizing the totality of the costs, the share responsibility, and so the technicality is that we'll basically we'll replenish the contingency in anticipation of the conclusion of those conversations.
So you're putting money in because you know you're going to spend it versus just having it sit there should there be something that comes up later.
Exactly, and these two amounts should be viewed as the upper bound of those of the results of those conversations. So
it wouldn't be cheaper just to draw it when you need it.
We won't draw it until we need it.
That's what I was trying to understand.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
That was my mistake. I understand now.
Are there additional questions?
No.
If there are no additional questions, can I get a motion to support the staff's recommendation and send the item to the full board?
Moved.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. The motion is approved. Are there any other items for discussion for the open portion of today's meeting? No. If there are no other items, then we will be moving into closed session, and I will read a written statement. Pursuant to section 3-305B and D of the General Provisions article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, I move to adopt the written closing statement dated September 1, 2023, and to adjourn this open session to a closed session to discuss two topics. The first topic is the potential acquisition of real property located in Rockville. Second topic is potential litigation that may be filed against HOC. The first topic is being discussed in closed session in order to protect HOC's ability to negotiate with third parties and to protect confidential commercial and financial information provided to HOC by a third party. The statutory sections that allow this topic to be discussed in a closed session are sections 3-305B3 and 3-305B13. The second topic is being discussed in closed session in order to protect HOC's attorney-client privilege and its other interests in the potential litigation. The statutory sections that allow this topic to be discussed in a closed session are sections 3-305B7, 3-305B8, and 3-305B13. If a member of the public that is watching this meeting in real time on YouTube wishes to object to the closed meeting, please comment in the YouTube chat box or contact HOC's General Counsel. Instructions can be found in the Open Meetings Act objection procedures, which is posted on HOC's website. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor of moving into closed session, please say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Motion is approved and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.